For more than half a century, one man managed to do what countless fugitives only dream of. He disappeared without changing his face, without leaving the country, and without committing another major crime. He became a loving husband, a devoted father, and a trusted friend. The people closest to him believed they knew everything about him. They didn't, because the man they loved had been living under a stolen identity since 1969. This is the unbelievable story of Theodore John Conrad, the bank teller who vanished with a fortune and spent the next 52 years hiding in plain sight. July 11, 1969. The city of Cleveland was preparing for another quiet summer weekend. Employees at Society National Bank were wrapping up another ordinary Friday. Among them was 20-year-old Theodore John Conrad. Ted wasn't a hardened criminal. He wasn't connected to organized crime. He wasn't drowning in debt. Friends described him as friendly, well-liked, and fascinated by movies, especially one movie, The Thomas Crown Affair. Released the previous year, it starred Steve McQueen as a wealthy businessman who orchestrated the perfect bank robbery and walked away untouched. Ted reportedly watched the film several times. Some investigators would later wonder if fiction had inspired reality. Working as a bank teller gave Ted something most people never had: access. He knew the routines, he knew the security, and most importantly, he knew that large cash shipments sometimes sat in the vault over weekends before anyone noticed they were missing. That Friday, he quietly placed approximately $215,000 into a paper bag. In today's money, that's worth well over $1 million. Then he simply walked out. No alarms, no chase, no dramatic getaway, just another employee leaving work on a Friday afternoon. When the bank reopened on Monday morning, Ted Conrad was gone. So was the money. Authorities immediately launched a nationwide manhunt. His photograph appeared in newspapers across America. The FBI joined the search. Tips poured in from every direction, but every lead ended the same way: nothing. It was as if Ted Conrad had vanished into thin air. Months turned into years. Years became decades. Eventually, investigators feared he was either dead or impossibly good at hiding. What no one realized was that Ted hadn't fled overseas. He hadn't disappeared into the wilderness. He had done something far more remarkable. He built an entirely new life. Hundreds of miles away, Ted reinvented himself as Thomas Randell. He found steady work in the automobile industry. He wasn't constantly moving from town to town. He didn't isolate himself from society. Instead, he did the exact opposite. He settled down. He made friends. He earned promotions. He coached children's sports. Neighbors described him as polite, dependable, and hardworking. Eventually, he met a woman named Kathy. They fell in love. They married. Together, they raised a daughter. To his family, Thomas Randell wasn't mysterious. He was simply Dad, a husband who went to work every morning, a father who attended family events, a man who worried about bills, retirement, and everyday life. No one suspected they were sharing a home with one of America's longest-running fugitives. Living under a false identity for more than 5 decades sounds almost impossible. Yet somehow, Ted managed it. He avoided drawing attention to himself. He stayed away from serious crime. He blended into ordinary suburban life so completely that even coworkers who spent years with him never questioned who he was. As technology evolved, from fingerprint databases to digital records, many assumed fugitives like Ted could never stay hidden. But his new identity had taken root long before the digital age. By the time computers became standard, Thomas Randell had decades of history behind him. School records, employment history, a mortgage, a family. He had become more than an alias. He had become a real person. Meanwhile, the FBI never officially closed the case. Every few years, someone would dust off the old file. Another investigator would take a fresh look. Most reached the same conclusion. The trail had gone cold decades earlier. Then came 2021. A team working on old cold cases noticed something unusual. One investigator began comparing Conrad's background with information connected to a man named Thomas Randell. Small details started lining up: birth dates, family connections, physical features. The deeper they looked, the harder it became to ignore. After more than 50 years, they had finally found him. But there was one heartbreaking twist. Ted Conrad was dying. He had recently been diagnosed with lung cancer. Before authorities could arrest him, he passed away. He was 71 years old. Only after his death did investigators confirm what they had suspected. Thomas Randell had been Theodore John Conrad all along. His wife learned the truth after more than 40 years of marriage. His daughter discovered that the father she had always known had spent her entire life hiding one extraordinary secret. Imagine that moment. Everything you believed about someone you loved suddenly rewritten in a single conversation. Friends were stunned. Neighbors couldn't believe it. To everyone around him, Ted had been an honest, dependable family man. Yet his entire adult life had been built on a lie that began with one paper bag full of cash. The story raises uncomfortable questions. Can someone truly leave their past behind? If a person spends decades living as a good husband, father, and neighbor, should they forever be defined by one crime committed in their youth? Or does every stolen identity carry consequences that never disappear, no matter how many years pass? For Theodore John Conrad, those questions were never answered in court. His secret survived for 52 years. Long enough to fool his family. Long enough to fool his friends. Long enough to fool nearly everyone. Until one cold case investigator refused to stop looking. Sometimes the most successful fugitives aren't hiding in remote forests or foreign countries. Sometimes they're living quietly next door, and no one has any idea who they really are.